impress him, takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.
Nuclear warfare. It's been a looming threat for over 70 years now. When you think of nuclear weapons, you probably picture the iconic mushroom cloud with absolute devastation and destruction beneath it. Perhaps even some horrific mutations caused by radioactive fallout. And sure, all of these fears are justified, because just one of these bombs can cause as much damage as an entire week of regular bombing runs over a city. So then, a question you might have asked yourself before is, would I survive a nuclear blast? The answer to this question will depend on multiple important factors, and the answer is never as clear-cut as it might first seem. One little boy and fat man were dropped in Japan, in the cities of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. They caused absolute devastation. If you look at the aftermath photos, then you can see the type of destruction that is to be expected with 20 kilotons of explosives. The worrying part is that nuclear weapons nowadays tend to range from 500 kilotons to over 1 megaton or 1000 kilotons. The most powerful nuke in history, the Tsar Bomba, was 50 megatons, over 2500 times as powerful as Fat Man, the bomb dropped in Nagasaki. The good news, nowadays at least, is that nuclear weapons are nowhere near as powerful, because high megaton counts have been traded for better accuracy, and one of the main reasons that larger nukes were made, aside from intimidation, is because the method of delivering a nuclear warhead was a lot less accurate in the 50s. So then, would you survive a nuclear bomb? The first thing you have to take into account is whether or not there are any major cities or military bases near you. If the answer is no, then chances are that you won't even have to worry about nuclear wars in the first place, only their aftermaths. But if you do live in or near a potential target, say within 20 miles, then it's time to start worrying. The most important thing to consider when asking about your chances of survival is your distance from the epicenter of the blast. The weather's important too, as cloudy weather will typically dampen the effects of the nuke and can absorb some of its energy. For this hypothetical nuclear explosion, let's use 1 megaton or 1000 kilotons as our test nuclear warhead, and let's say the explosion will happen on a clear day. And this is sort of on the upper end of estimates. 1 megaton is on the high end, believe it or not, these days. Chances are it's going to be around 500 kilotons in real life, because believe it or not, the difference between 500 kilotons and 1 megaton isn't really that massive. Okay, so this nuclear weapon is also going to be launched by a major world superpower, which means that it'll be an airburst, and it'll be detonated a few kilometers in the sky. So let's just say around 4 kilometers. Okay, so here we go. Air raid sirens are going off. BBC's broadcasting all sorts of nonsense warning messages that won't help you. And as the nuclear warhead nears the ground, you're shitting your pants. And the nuke's just gone off, 4 kilometers above the city you live near. Now let's see what happens at different distances from the epicenter of the blast. If you're within 1 kilometer of the epicenter, then your chances of survival are basically zero. You would be crushed by the nuke's overpressure. Even if you're underground, you'd most likely be trapped until you met your grisly demise. There would be an increased amount of radiation at the moment of detonation. So even if you somehow don't get immediately obliterated by the nuclear weapon, the sheer levels of radiation will destroy you. That is, if you don't evaporate immediately. Now, if you're outside this 2.9 kilometer squared circle, or further than 1 kilometer from the epicenter of the blast, your chances are still awful. Anything anywhere within 10 kilometers of the blast would spontaneously combust into flames. The heat from the blast would cause third-degree burns or worse, and the 10 psi overpressure would destroy even concrete or steel buildings. And of course it would completely destroy your lungs and ears, as well as potentially being hit with supersonic flying debris and being launched by the blast wave yourself. That means that even in order to have a chance of survival, you need to be at least further than 10 kilometers from the explosion. Let's pick a distance at around 12 kilometers. At this distance, third-degree burns may still occur, but the shockwave is a lot less powerful. It should be under 5 psi now. Let's say you're near a window, perhaps at your workplace, or most likely at home. If you're near a window and you see a blinding light, brighter than the sun itself, all of a sudden, you must mentally prepare yourself to not look at it. It'll be in your human nature to look at this light. You'll want to look at it. But looking directly at the blast would put you at a massive disadvantage, as it could cause temporary blindness and even some burns. So what you should do is you should immediately dive away from the window, just duck beneath it, and then crawl away to the center of the building you're in. If you're outside, then, well, you're fucked. But also, you should probably get your ass on the floor with your face down and hands on your head, because, well, life's gone really, really bad for you. You might not survive. No, but in all seriousness, if you're outside, your chances of survival are slightly lower, but you can still get yourself to a building, maybe a nearby shopping center or something, and just avoid looking at the bright, shiny object in the sky, of course. There will be 2 of them this time, so if you can resist looking at the sun, then resist looking at this nuclear blast. It's quite simple, actually. Okay, so let's move back to the building POV. Now, after around 40 seconds, you should expect the shockwave to arrive. Expect to hear windows shattering and a loud bang. And after this is over, walk back to your window and try to get a look at the mushroom cloud. Is it white in color? And is it disconnected from the ground? If the answer to these questions was yes, then this means that a nuclear war has most likely broken out, and this was no single terrorist event. In this case, remain put in your current location, and don't attempt to leave the area in your car. Await a rescue from military forces, as the area you're in shouldn't be nuked more than twice. Now, there's no point in trying to get away and escape to other cities or towns, because other locations could be getting nuked next, since you are in a nuclear war, after all. Fortunately, you won't have to worry about any radiation or radioactive fallout, as this was an airburst nuke, and any fallout will have been scattered in the upper atmosphere. Now, you can tell it's an airburst by checking, as stated previously, the colour and appearance of the mushroom cloud. A dark, sooty mushroom cloud that is connected to the ground by a thick stem is a groundburst nuke, and that will produce a lot of fallout. In that case, try to outrun the fallout by leaving the area in the opposite direction of the wind, if your car still starts, that is. If your car doesn't start, then, well, you're going to have to stay put. You're basically going to have to barricade yourself inside your home, get to the middle. Was that a bird? A bird just flew into my window, okay. Get yourself to the center of the building you're in, and then barricade yourself inside the building you're in, and then make sure that you secure as much water as possible while there still is running water. Fill as many empty containers as possible with water, because you're going to need it. Now, the key to survival in this situation is to not leave your house for the next 2 weeks. That is, if you couldn't get to your car in time. If you could get to your car in time, then you've got nothing to worry about. You can just outrun the nuclear fallout. But if your car doesn't work, or you're nowhere near your car, then yeah, just continue following these steps. So food isn't really that much of a problem, because you can go without food for months. Now, after 2 weeks' time, if no help has arrived, or you're still on your own, you haven't seen any activities from neighbors, or there's no activity outside, then you're probably going to have to begin venturing out and scavenging for supplies. And also try to sort of gauge the severity of the situation you're in. Now, this is only if the nuclear bomb that has gone off is a ground burst, which is very, very unlikely, because a ground burst nuke basically means that it's a terrorist nuke and a bunch of terrorists got their hands on a nuclear weapon and decided to detonate it at ground level, basically. So This is a very unlikely scenario. Anyways, let's continue on with the airburst nuke, which is the more likely scenario where superpowers are basically in a nuclear war with each other. The reason superpowers use airbursts instead of ground bursts is because an airburst will cause a lot more destruction compared to a ground burst, because the blast isn't being absorbed by the ground or by nearby buildings. An airburst nuke will produce a white, clean looking mushroom cloud, as I've stated previously, with no stem or a disconnected stem. And this also means that once the fires have been put out, you can walk directly underneath where the bomb exploded and you'll be completely fine. There'll be no radiation whatsoever. These are the same nukes that have been used in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, where radiation isn't really a problem at all, and never really was except after the initial blast. I mean, you can go in Nagasaki and Hiroshima right now and you'll be completely fine. Radiation levels are a smidge above background, nothing noticeable at all. But this is the case with most nuclear disaster sites. I mean, even Chernobyl has a lower radiation level than being in a plane, for example. So you can literally live your life right beside reactor 4 and you'll be fine. Most people can't wrap their head around this idea. Yes, the radiation levels will be higher than your normal background levels for 10,000 years, but they're still perfectly fine. They're still extremely low. Because guess what? The most radioactive isotopes decay very, very quickly. So there you go. If that doesn't remove your fears of radiation poisoning, then I don't know what will. Even a ground burst nuke won't really produce that much radioactive fallout, and the most dangerous radiation should decay within 2 weeks, so you'll be fine. But when awaiting the military, if there is any, you should remember that water is more important than food, and there'll be no more running water, and then you're truly done for. So you should probably set up rain buckets and fill as many containers as possible with tap water before the pressure drops completely. Don't attempt to loot shops, as that's exactly what everyone else will be doing. Save any canned, non-perishable food you have, and remember that food isn't really worth it. And finding food should be a lot easier if you have a long-range weapon like a bow or a gun, and such a weapon will also come in handy for self-defense, assuming society has indeed collapsed. You should probably try to find a battery-powered radio and see if you can follow the situation as it unfolds. So now that I've given you this advice, I have to come out and say that it's completely useless. You'll never need to use it. And this is why. Nuclear wars are most likely never going to happen. Nuclear weapons, so far, have saved far more lives than they have taken. And no, I'm not just talking about Japan and the USA. I'm talking about the countless world wars that have been prevented thanks to the principle of MAD. Even if a lunatic world leader managed to launch a nuke for some bizarre reason, most world powers will agree to work together to neutralize that threat. Let's say North Korea decides to launch a nuke randomly. Well, China might feel obliged to join in and support North Korea, but at the same time, China knows that it doesn't really want to commit suicide by engaging in nuclear warfare with other world superpowers. So what might be done is a quick agreement set up to completely eradicate North Korea, since it's not really that valuable to anyone anyways. And in this agreement, all the world superpowers might all agree to just eradicate North Korea, wipe it off the map, and prevent any further escalation. Because guess what? People actually want to survive. People don't just want to commit suicide by nuclear warfare, believe it or not. Even maniacal world leaders understand that nuclear war is quite destructive. In reality, nuclear weapons have been preventing potential world wars for over 70 years now. Because if those two nukes hadn't been dropped in 1945, the casualties could have been triple what they are now. Nuclear weapons could be one of the greatest inventions ever, but if things do turn out differently in the future, they could become one of the worst inventions ever. We just don't know, but so far, they've done nothing but keep world peace, and the worst after effects of the invention of the nuke are over, as far as we know. Well guys, this is the end of the video, and if you enjoyed it, then go ahead and drop a like. If you didn't, feel free to dislike. My next video will be another space related video, and yeah, my content is just generally science related. But if you have any other recommendations, then drop them below. Thanks for watching, and oh, one last thing. You better subscribe.